Okay, in this video we're going to deflask our case. If you recall from the last video, the pressure that we've applied through a hydraulic press hasn't changed at all because of this type of compress. So it holds this pressure until the acrylic is cured. This is a good thing. So I anticipate to have very little opening in the bite using this type of compress. So I'm going to just take my adjustable wrench here now. Just undo both nuts. Very simple. Remove our flasks, and that can go to the side. I have a hammer here. I have some plaster clippers here, or deflasking clippers, whatever you want to call them. I'm also going to get a pair of insulated gloves. And also, thank you, my cameraman is passing me some more equipment. And I'm going to take just a left-handed glove, so I can hold the case, so if I happen to hit my hand, at least I'll take off some of the blow. You can see the lid came off rather easily. So at this point, basically you want to tap the back of the flasks gently. Don't hold it way up here, because at some point this is going to give. Doesn't work very well. So I'll take that off just to get a little more grip on it. Just be careful not to hit your fingers, obviously. So gently tap the back side, and that should slide out rather easily. Of course, it all depends on the quality of the flask and how well you lubricated it with Vaseline. So we have a little bit of a flash here, which is expected. Very little. That's good. And you can certainly clean off your flasks now, so they're ready to be used next time you invest another case. So just do that just for demonstration purposes, or you can do it at a later time. It really doesn't make a difference. Just gonna scrape that out from both sides. That there. Now this one is a little more challenging to remove, so I'm going to put a little washer here and gently tap it. Now keep in mind, I'm not holding the bottom of the stone here. I'm supporting the flask like so, not like so. Because if you do it like this, nothing's going to happen. So make sure you put most of your finger pressure on the upper half of the flask. And eventually this will come off. Just clean off any excess stone and or acrylic. Not much there. I tend to use a rather dull knife to do this. This is a little sharp. Otherwise, over time, you're going to be scraping too much of your flask. And this is only brass, right? So it will give. Okay. Put that back in there. Everything is nice and tight. This is clean. You might see in other videos people using these clippers to snap things off. I tend not to. I've had more issues using these, possibly prying the case open and breaking it. So I tend to use a hammer. When I knock the investment off, keep in mind somewhere in here, I'll just score it just for visual purposes. This is where the teeth are, somewhere in here. So if I put pressure somewhere along the buckle corridor here, and I'm holding both of these together like so, this is the upper one, mind you, it should start peeling away. And you can hear the different sound as the stone is starting to break apart. And that comes off rather easily without having to do this. This I could probably make more damage. You should have just a very thin flash of acrylic, not much to it. There. And you can see the teeth here where we invested it. I can just chip that off. I had a little bit of the tooth that broke there during the separation of the case, which is okay. I think I can work with that. Try to pry out this portion as much as you can, if you can, so you don't break anything. You can always use a pneumatic chisel to knock things out. I don't think I'll need it yet, so I'll set it to the side. And I'm just trying to find just a little opening in here and see if I can pry this open without a lot of pressure. You don't want to be using a lot of pressure because you could possibly break things. We have a little bit of acrylic that came through here, probably a void in our investment, which is okay. We can just simply trim that off. Just kind of peel away the flash here. Now be careful with this part because it's almost like knife edge and you can easily cut your hands. And I'm trying to peel it off the occlusal as much as possible because I need this section. I want the occlusal surfaces of the teeth because I need to mill in my centric and check all of the excursions. I broke off a little bit of the lateral there, so be very careful. So I'm going to go back and see if I can knock off the lower half of the investment. So again, down the buckle corridor here. So I'm trying to apply the force in this direction here. And that should peel rather easily, just like that. You can hear the different change in the sound as the stone is starting to break away and peel away. The base of this model could have been a little bit thicker to prevent any breakage of the model. Here we have our acrylic tags. We don't need to remove those right away. We can remove them a little bit later. And here's the part of the model that broke earlier, but we'll see how well this is going to fit against our duplicate model. So it's always a good idea to have a duplicate model. Trying to peel some of the flash of acrylic off the occlusal because this is going to interfere with selective grinding. I'm going to peel off as much as I can, but then I'll use a finer tool to get in there a little bit more when I get this case on the bench. Here's the little chip that I had on the lateral. Now, if you happen to have a case where you had to not deflask it and you couldn't save any of the master cast, so things kind of fell apart on you, you still have your duplicate models and you still have your bite block that you use to mount them. You can remount your duplicate models and retrofit the case on your duplicate models and do your selective grinding again. So I'll set that to the side. We'll get rid of all of this stuff in case we need to we break any teeth and we need to know where to find them. So now we'll go to the lower, obviously. Again, don't hold it up here. Hold it relatively close to the bench. Little taps. Could have used maybe a little more Vaseline on this case. There it goes. Relatively clean, nothing to clean there. That goes back to here. Clean off my lid. And if you recall, I didn't use any separating medium for the lid itself, so it comes off rather easily. You don't want to use any separator or any Vaseline or any type of separating medium for the lid because it's going to come off while you're processing the case, like it did with this particular case, but I was able to manage it. Just going to use the lid here. And that came off a little bit better. Clean off the stone, possibly any flash of acrylic. It's still on there. That looks pretty good. And here's a little flash of acrylic right here. Again, whenever you see flash of acrylic, be very careful with your hands. And don't cut yourself with it. And you want to be sure that you clean your flask properly, because if you leave this on for the next case, it could alter the bite for the next case you're going to be working on. So make sure your flasks are nice and clean. Chances are, I like to clean my flasks now, because chances are the next one you're going to invest, you're probably going to rush for some reason. So keep them clean so you know they're clean, and all you got to do is just coat them with a little bit of Vaseline and you're good to go. So I'll place it back on here, put my lid on here, put everything back in my compress so they're nice and secure and I know where to find them. Just hand tighten that a little bit and just give it a final twist so everything is in one piece. Okay, so back to this. Again, I'm going to start with the top half of the investment. And if you recall on this one, we use a little bit of paper to act like a little stress point. And you can see this portion peels away because of the paper that's in there, which makes it easier now for this to peel away with very little pressure. And that's good. That's what I need. I don't need to be using a lot of force to pry things apart. And I can see a little bit of a gap here. So I'm just gonna use my knife. Try not to pry it on top of the model surface because you're probably gonna break things. I typically try to wedge my knife between the investment and the acrylic base. So it peels off like that. I don't need to remove this part right here. It's not gonna get in the way of selective grinding. So I'm gonna leave it as it is. So everything is pulling away nicely. Margins are nice and clean. That's relatively clean, providing that we just took things out of the flask. And we're looking for a nice thin layer of flash. So I'm just gonna break things off a little more. And try to peel this little flash of acrylic as much as I can. I'm going to do it a little more carefully on the bench with some different instruments, as you'll see a little bit later. And so we can do a laboratory remount on our articulator so we can go through our clinical remount. Just kind of tentatively putting things together. Things look pretty good. Obviously there's interference back here with this this little piece of acrylic, but we'll manage that with some burrs. So all in all, things look pretty good. There's no indication of any porosity. I think there's an adequate thickness to the acrylic base. Margins look pretty clean. So this would be considered a nice finish that we can equilibrate and then eventually trim and polish.